Lesson 8-7, Quadratic Equations, Day 2. We have 4 examples today, and they are very similar to what we did yesterday. The only difference is we're going to have a little added step at the end because you may notice that these are equations, so they have an equal sign in them. So what we're going to have to do that's a little different is make sure that we've got our quadratic on one side of the equation and 0 on the other side, and make sure that our quadratic is written in standard form. So we're going to identify A, B, and C. A is 4 for this problem because it's the number in front of x squared. B is 17, it's the number in front of x. And then 15 does not have a variable. So the product that we are looking for, we're going to factor by grouping. The product we're looking for is A times C. 4 times 15 is 60. And the sum that we're looking for, it has to have a sum of B. So the sum that we're looking for is 17. Okay, so product of 60 could be 1 times 60, 2 times 30, 3 times 20, 4 times 15, 5 times 12, 6 times 10. I think that's it. Can't think of any more. So now if I add them, my sums are 61, 32, 23, 19, 17, and 16. So the sum that we were looking for is 17, and I see that right here. So we are going to use the product of 5 and 12. Okay, now, to factor by grouping, I need to keep my first term. I need 4 terms here. So I'm keeping my first term, 4x squared. I'm also keeping my last term, plus 15. And of course, my equals 0. The 2 middle terms are going to come from 5 and 12. Now, the number 4, the coefficient here, 4x squared, doesn't have any common factors with 5, but it does with 12. So I need to put my plus 12x first, and then my plus 5x after it. The 5 and 12 represent the two middle terms, so the order doesn't matter which you place them, except for that we're factoring by grouping. So it's not going to make any sense to group a term that it doesn't have a common factor with. We're not going to get anywhere. So now I can group together my first 2 terms and take out their greatest common factor. The numbers 4 and 12, the largest thing that they can be divided by evenly is 4. And there's a common variable here, x. So I can divide out 4x from each term. 4x times x is 4x squared, plus 4x times 3 is 12x. So that's just using the distributive property in reverse. Now, I need to match that x plus 3 binomial over here. So what do I divide out? What am I dividing out of 5x plus 15? That would have to be a positive 5. 5 times x is 5x, plus 5 times 3 is 15. So now I've got my problem set. So now I can take my binomial, x plus 3, that they have in common. So my first binomial factor is x plus 3. And then I look at what it was that I factored out, 4x plus 5, for my second binomial. So 4x plus 5. So my 2 factors for 4x squared plus 17x plus 15, my 2 binomial factors are x plus 3 and 4x plus 5. Now, I'm not quite done yet because I need to use the 0 product property. Remember, the 0 product property said if A times B equals 0, so the answer to your multiplication problem, if it equals 0, then one of the things that you were multiplying has to be a 0. So A or B must equal 0. The only way to get an answer of 0 when you're multiplying is to take something times 0. So I'm going to set each of my binomial factors equal to 0. So the first one I set equal to 0. I would subtract 3 on both sides. So x equals negative 3. The second one I set equal to 0. It's a little bit more work to solve this one. I would subtract 5. So 4x equals negative 5. Then divide by 4. So x equals negative 5 fourths. So my two solutions, x equals negative 3, or x equals negative 5 fourths. Example number 2, a equals 10, b equals negative 35, and c equals 30. So my product this time, 10 times 30 is 300, and we need a sum of b, so my sum needs to be negative 35. So multiplying, I have to get 300, but adding, I have to get negative 35. So that means both of my terms need to be negative. So negative 1 times negative 300 would be positive 300. If I add them, I get negative 301. Negative 2 times negative 150, so that would be negative 152. Negative 3 times negative 100, that would be negative 103. Negative 5 times 60, negative 60. So it would be negative 65. Negative 6 times negative 50, negative 56. Let's see, what else? Negative 10 times negative 30 would be negative 40. We're getting closer. And negative 12 times negative 25, negative 37. Getting closer again. And hopefully this one's the winner. Negative 15 times negative 20 is 300. And that one adds to negative 35. So sometimes it takes a while to figure out your pair of factors used, but we've got it. Okay, so I need the 10x squared and the plus 30 from up at the top. So 10x squared, my first term, plus 30 equals 0 from my last term. Now, the order that I put these in, 15 and 20 have common factors with both of these. I'm going to put the negative 20x first and then the negative 15x. It really doesn't matter though. You'll end up with the same answers either way at the end. So if I group these two together, I can factor out a 10x. 10x times x is 10x squared minus 10x times 2 is 20x. That looks good. So now over here I need to match the x minus 2. So it's going to take a little bit more thought. So looking at this term, negative 15x, I would need to take out a negative 15. Negative 15 times x is negative 15x. Negative 15 times negative 2 is positive 30. So my first binomial is x minus 2. And then my second binomial, what I factored out, 10x minus 15. And I need to solve both of these. So x minus 2 equals 0. Add 2. And x equals 2. 10x minus 15 equals 0. Add add 15. 10x equals 15. Then divide by 10. 15 divided by 10 is 1.5. So my two answers are x equals 2 or x equals 1.5. Example number 3. On this problem, I do not have a 0 on the right-hand side, so I need to subtract that 8. Subtract that 8 so that my quadratic is 9x squared plus 6x minus 8 equals 0. You have to get your quadratic in standard form, and you have to set it equal to 0 to use the zero product property. So now A equals 9, B equals 6, and C equals negative 8. So I'm looking for a product of 9 times negative 8, so negative 72, and a sum of 6. Okay. Negative 1 times 72, negative 2 times 36, negative 3 times 24. None of these are going to give me a sum of 6. These would be 71, 34, and 21. So negative 4 times 18, it's a sum of 14. Negative 6 times 12, there's my sum of 6. So I don't need to keep going with my factors. First term, 9x squared. Last term, now I'm going to change this up here. So this was 9x squared plus 6x minus 8 equals 0. Because otherwise I may end up thinking that my last term is positive 8, but it's really negative 8. So be careful. Now those two terms that are going to be used, it doesn't really matter what order they go in because they're going to have common factors either way. So I'll just go with negative 6x and then plus 12x. In the end, I'll get the same result. I can group these together. Their greatest common factor, I can divide both numbers by 3. So 3x. 3x times 3x is 9x squared. Minus 3x times 2 is 6x, negative 6x. So I need to match my 3x minus 2 over here. So look at this grouping, and what am I multiplying by to get my positive 12x? 4. 4. So 4 times 3x is 12x. 4 times negative 2 is negative 8. So my first binomial is 3x minus 2, the one that matches, and my second one, 3x plus 4. Okay, now we just need to do the zero product property. 3x minus 2 equals 0. Some of you may be able to do this part in your head. Others may not, so don't worry about it. Just write it out and solve it. Be careful. So I added 2, and now I'm dividing by 3. So x equals 2/3. 3x plus 4 equals 0. Subtract 4. 3x equals negative 4. Divide by 3. X equals negative 4/3. Because these denominators are 3, they're repeating decimals, so I'm keeping them as fractions instead of writing them as repeating decimals. All right, our last example. Negative 4x squared equals negative 11x plus 6. To get everything on the same side on this one, I'm going to choose to add the 4x squared to both sides. You can move them to the right or to the left. I'm just moving them all to the right so that I have 0 equals 4x squared minus 11x plus 6, because that involved only moving one term instead of 2. So A equals 4, B equals negative 11, C equals 6. So we need a product of A times C. So our product needs to be 24, and our sum needs to be negative 11. And I'm going to write my quadratic up here so that I don't get confused. Okay, so product of 24, sum of negative 11. Negative 1 times negative 24, too low. Negative 2 times negative 12, little too low. Negative 3 times negative 8, now it matches the sum that I'm looking for. Remember, as soon as you find it, you can stop. You can stop. So now my quadratic, my first term is 4x squared, my last one is 6. And I have minus 3x and minus 8x. This minus 3x does not have any common terms with the 4x squared, so I need to put it by the 6. And then the minus 8x by my 4x squared. So I can factor out a 4x. 4x times x is 4x squared, minus 4x times 2 is 8x. So I need to match the x minus 2. So looking at this negative 3x, that means I factored out a negative 3. Negative 3 times x is negative 3x. Negative 3 times negative 2 is positive 6. So my factors are x minus 2 and 4x minus 3. I can set each one equal to 0, and we will have our solutions. So x minus 2 equals 0. Add 2 on both sides. X equals 2. 4x minus 3 equals 0. Add 3 on both sides. 4x equals 3. And divide by 4. X equals 3/4, or 0.75. You can leave that one a fraction or a decimal. So x equals 2, or x equals 0.75. You should be able to work on your homework problems now. Please check the homework calendar or check with your teacher to find your assignment.